Zelda 2 is a 2D platformer game that was released in the late 80s for the NES system. The Zelda 2 game is quite different from its predecessor and basically all the other ones that came after it, since almost all the sections with action are 2D, like 2D action platformer style. In the late 80s, Zelda 2 was a very impressive game. However, since I just played it now in early 2021, the game has some problems. The main issue with Zelda 2 is that it doesn't respect your time. The game presents a lot of cryptic hints. They're very hard to understand, and usually they're not very specific at all. The game was very limited with what text it could display, and they didn't really do a good job. I don't know if it's because the game was originally Japanese and they had bad translators, or what the deal is, but a lot of the messages are just, they're almost incomprehensible, especially for some of them. Like you have some old woman mumbling about a rock, and you're supposed to know to use a hammer on it, for example. There are also other puzzles that are quite hard to understand, and a lot of them you just wouldn't think of doing it. Like using a spell on an empty area in a town that's named Spell. Another thing that annoys me in Zelda 2 is that when you lose all of your lives for the continue, you lose all of your XP. Getting XP in this game is almost like a pretty grindy process. The XP for the next level can be very high, and enemies don't tend to give you a lot of XP. And also, once you're dead, you are sent back to the starting palace of the game. So you have to do a lot of backtracking in this game unless you're pretty good at it. If you do want to enjoy this game, I highly recommend that you get a guide. Just have it sitting next to you and refer to it. When you use the guide, it is important to read ahead. You need to make sure that you read ahead at least a chapter and to get all of the abilities that you can as you come across them. Get the extra techniques like the down thrust, the up thrust. You need to get all of the magic potions for thunder, because you need that for the last boss. You can't even get the spell if you don't get a lot of those magic potions. He won't give it to you. You also need to make sure that you get the spells from each of the towns, because there is another boss besides the last boss that you need a spell in order to defeat. It's not a lot of fun when you go all the way to the end and then find that you can't defeat the boss because you didn't get a spell. So there is that. But the game does have its upsides. I can really see how somebody who really progresses with the game and really starts to know where to go and understands the mechanics can have a lot of fun with Zelda 2. Once you unlock a lot of the abilities, you get more options. And it is fun to attack the enemies when you're not trying to figure out where to go or having to be wary of falling into pits and losing all your experience. So the game is actually fun at its core. Unfortunately, the music in Zelda 2 is about the weakest as it gets of the entire franchise. A lot of the themes are very repetitive, and there's just not a lot of variation or themes. There's in fact very few themes. There's like the battle theme, the palace theme, the intro, and I think the overworld, and that's it. Oh, and the town. It's just a very bare bones music library. The graphics in Zelda 2 are interesting to look at least. A lot of the enemies are colorful and at least somewhat detailed for late 80s graphics. And some of the boss designs are pretty cool, actually. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to say that Zelda 2's probably not worth your time. It has been over 30 years, and there are a lot of other better 2D action platformers. Unless you're a big fan of the Zelda games and you want to go back and explore them, this one you can probably pass up. But if you do want to give this game a fair shake, just remember that you should be using a guide. And if I had to rate the game, I would probably rate it fairly low, like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. It just has a lot of issues, and it's more frustrating than fun. And thank you for watching.